And good evening and welcome to Lift FM 98.5, 103.3 FM, and 97.9 on your FM radio dial. And as always, we are on the World Wide Web with all of our programs as they're broadcast for the first time at liftfm.com. A complete archive of all of our programs here on Second Chances are available at www.advantageradioministries.org. That is advantageradioministries.org. And we have a wonderful guest with us tonight, Mr. Jerry Pollock. And Jerry, we're complaining here in New Jersey about the 90-degree days, and where you're at in Florida, it's probably like a spring day there. Am I right?
For about 4 or 5 months, you get 90s. You get somewhere around mid-95 most of those 5 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty constant. The weather really doesn't change except for a little bit of rain. But the rain is, most of the time is just for a little while, and then you get the sun coming back out again.
Oh, yeah. Every time I've been down there, take my daughter or my son to Disney World, that's usually the case. We get the nice days, and all of a sudden you get a heavy shower, and then about 30 minutes, 20 minutes later, it's gone and nice again.
Yeah, that's about Florida.
Jerry, you have an interesting book to tell us about. We're going to get into that a little bit, but just to give us a little background of who you are, tell us a little bit about where your roots are and where you're from and things like that, just so we kind of learn who you are.
Well, I was born in Toronto. I was born in 1941, September 10th, which my 70th biblical birthday is coming up. And I grew up there. My parents were kind of neurotic, and the growing up was not necessarily the best environment, but I grew up nevertheless, and I went to school in Toronto, and one of the things that I found that I could do well was to kind of excel in academics. So I did my high school, then Bachelor of Pharmacy, and then my college master's degree in pharmacy, my graduate degree, and then I went on. I thought on several occasions I might go into medicine, but I got bitten by scientific research, so I went over to Israel to do a PhD, and at that time the Canadian government was supporting you with special fellowships, and I won a fellowship, and I wound up trying to go to different places here in the States from Toronto. Tried Harvard, I tried England, and things didn't work out, and for one reason or another. So I got an offer to do my PhD at the Weizmann Institute in Israel, and I completed that PhD. It was in the Department of Biophysics, and it was more in the biochemistry area, and then came back to New York and spent 4 years learning about microbiology, and then wound up leaving NYU Medical School, the microbiology department, and joining the faculty at Stony Brook University on Long Island, not too far from you in New Jersey, a few hours, I guess, about 4 hours.
Yeah, we're at the southern end of the state.
Right. Well, Philly's about. I think I could have made Philly in about 4 hours from Stony Brook, but anyway, I did my academics and wound up being in Stony Brook from about 1973 to 2006. But there was a 5-year long-term disability in that period, because in 1991 I came down with bipolar disorder, and I had a major manic psychotic episode in 1991. Came out of that, and then had another episode in 1995, and nothing really helped. In 1995, I swallowed 200 pills, and I'm lucky to be here, and somehow I managed to come through that period with help from the divine, and my wife, and I seemed to be getting better in 1998, and in 2000 I came back to Stony Brook after a 5-year long-term leave, and spent another 6 years at Stony Brook, then retired down here in Florida. So that's pretty well the academic side of Jerry Pollock.
Just a question. You mentioned that you had a couple of bouts with bipolar disease. Did you ever have any indication before you had your first bout with it that that might be a condition that you could be experiencing?
No. I really had a tough time in the family. I came from an unwanted mother, a mother who didn't want me, and the environment wasn't great. But nevertheless, I kind of survived that. But I began to do, I began to do primal therapy in 1981, and it's kind of a therapy, a regressive therapy. And I've done quite a lot of that, where you regress back and you feel the feelings as they were back when you were a child or even inside the womb. And so I think I did a little bit too much of that on my own. And I think what happened in 1991, it kicked into a manic psychotic episode, but I had no warning. And I was really out there. I was really flying, because when you're in mania, full-blown mania and psychosis, people are talking to you and you're listening, but you're really not listening. You're beyond reach. And so to answer the question, no, I didn't. And then things started to fall apart for me in my grants, because I was a scientist and I had many years of grants and research publications. And when they started to fall apart for me, I went into an agitated depression. So it's kind of a depression due to both sides of bipolar, one side being the depression and one side being the mania and the psychosis. And what happened was everything started to fall apart, and I just couldn't deal with it all. So what I did was I succumbed to I drifted into a depression. I saw myself going in, and I actually said to myself, holy cow, I'm going into depression, and I couldn't stop it. And I went into severe anxiety and depression in 95, and then I couldn't stand it. I couldn't sit still for, any more than 30 seconds with this kind of depression, because it's called akathisia, and it's like you have worms inside of you. And I wasn't really treated by the psychiatrist at the time in 95 for that agitation. So after a few months, my wife was, she was out about 45 minutes in a diner with my daughter, who was home from school. And what happened was, when they went away, I had this plan, and I had two bottles, 100 each, of these Canadian pills, codeine with either aspirin or Tylenol. And after a while, when they had gone, what I did was I started to swallow these pills. And eventually it became very easy. I took them by the handfuls. And I had been taking pills all my life for headaches and migraine headaches. And what happened was that 45 minutes away, my wife and daughter had ordered. And I had taken the pills and was lying down in the bed. My wife and daughter had ordered. And my wife said to my daughter, my wife Marcia, who's recently deceased, she said, Aaron, we have to go. Something's wrong with Dad. She got up and came home to find me lying there. I was at peace. I had swallowed the 200 pills. And she called the fire department. I said I didn't want to go, and then she started to cry when they were going to leave, because they won't take you unless you're willing to go. And I was at that point very groggy, and I thought I'd never saw a light like people describe. My soul didn't leave me and appear on the ceiling and look back at me. I had not reached that point. But nevertheless, I was at peace. The depression seemed to have been lifted temporarily. And I finally saw the way she looked, and I agreed to go, and they rushed me to the hospital. They pumped my stomach, and for 48 to 72 hours, they didn't know whether I was going to live. But I came out of it, and I'm kind of here today, and I started getting better from the bipolar disorder in 1998. In fact, I kept ordering my prescriptions because I was afraid to lose my disability at the university. But I stopped taking them one at a time very slowly. I have a pharmacy background. So I got off all of these. There were 4 medications at the time. There was lithium, which is a mood stabilizer, and I was on an antipsychotic, and I was on 2 antidepressants, and the lithium was the last thing to get off. And I got off these drugs, and yet I still had the prescriptions. And then at the end of 1998, I started to get better, and the reason I started to feel better in 98, but at the end of 98, I had these spiritual experiences, and because of those spiritual experiences with divine intervention, divine providence, I started on a new path, a spiritual path, and I began to read. I began to read in the Hebrew Bible. I was reading in the Christian Bible, in the New Testament, the Old Testament, and I started to read on anthropology. I started to read on creation and evolution. I just began a whole process which was different from my scientific learning, although I've used science in all of my writings. And what happened was I said, I think I have to write about some of the things that have happened to me. So I put a memoir together called Divinely Inspired in 2003, and I wrote about me when I was a little bit younger, and I published the book, and I described my background as much as you can put into a book, and I described these spiritual experiences. And then I talked about spirituality and, about walking in God's path and following the 10 Commandments. And I talked about creation and evolution from my science background and how I view that in terms of in relation of creation to evolution. And then I kept going, and I've been on this spiritual ladder since the end of 1998. And I wrote another book in 2009 called The Messiah Interviews, and that was a biblical fiction. And just recently I wrote Gog and Magog, and really I didn't realize till maybe the last few days that I'm really writing a trilogy. Oh, one more point is that in 1982, when I was separated and on my way to a divorce from my first marriage, I was in a cottage, and I heard an external voice, and at that time there was no bipolar disorder because that was 1991, and I was up on a loft and I was working my writings from the primal therapy, and I was so frustrated because I wasn't getting anywhere with the therapy that I started in 1981, and it was 1982 now, and I had all of my books, and I was up on this loft, and I had written all these laboratory notebooks, about 7 of them. There's about 300 pages in each book. It's a hardcover book. And I took all 7 books, and I had this ladder leading down, but I took the 7 books. I was at the edge of the loft, and I smashed them against the floor below. And at that point, I heard a sound, but this is back in 1982. I heard this sound, and it was an external voice, and it was like a very assertive type voice, and the voice said, "And you shall be mine." And then what happened was that 2 weeks later, I heard the voice again, "And you shall have." And I didn't tell anybody about what I had heard, even my wife, until I had seen a therapist, and it was... She was a psychologist. She was paralyzed from the waist down. She was part of the Christian Society and Dr. Peterson on Long Island. And I described that I think for the first time to her, hearing the voice. And she said to me, "Who do you think the voice was?" And I said, "That was the voice of God." And she said, "I believe you." And I think I told my wife either before or after, I can't remember. My second wife, Marcia, my soulmate. But then at the end of 1988 and beginning of 1998, when I had other spiritual experiences, I heard the voice again. And this time I was with my son. And what happened was when I left my first marriage, I didn't take very much with me. I think I took a couple of pots and pans. I took my desk. I took one little picture. And I took a gold buckle ring. It was all gold, and it was a pretty heavy ring. And it belonged to my ex-wife, and it belonged to her family. And I don't know what possessed me. My son Sean was over for Friday night dinner, and I walked him out to the car. And he was starting up, and I knocked on the window, and he rolled the car window down, and I took off the gold buckle ring, and I gave it to him. And I heard that voice again that I heard in 1982, and the voice this time said, "This is not of me, this gold ring." And I tried to write about what that meant when I wrote the first book, Divinely Inspired, in 2003. But at that time, I'm not sure what my interpretations were of any of these miraculous events that happened to me. And so what was really amazing was that he never heard the voice, and yet I'm hearing the voice, this external voice. I no longer have bipolar disorder. I haven't had anything since that 95 episode, and since I got better in 98. This is 2011. I haven't had any mental illness, so I've been blessed. But nevertheless, he didn't hear it. He didn't hear, "This is not of me." We did share another experience, that happened. Sean and I experienced. We had shared another experience, but nevertheless, all of these things have happened to me and kind of propelled me in a direction of my writings. I'm kind of writing this third book, Gog and Magog, which is more of a novel, a fiction, and yet every book that I write, the three of them that I wrote, always have something biblical and always have something to do with God. As I start off writing in the sense that I'm writing for my own notoriety and my own fame, but after climbing this spiritual ladder that I've been doing, I reached a point where it's not necessarily for me anymore. That what I'm doing is I'm whatever my mission in this life is, it's somehow connected to my writings and my belief in God. And I've reached the point now where I have an unshakable faith in God. And even losing my wife in March, I still have that unshakable faith. And even though with all of the sadness and the crying, because I loved her so much, yet I still have that belief, such strong belief, and it's not a religious belief. Because I don't lead a religious life, but it's a spiritual belief. It's like my personal contact and my connection with God.
You wrote in an email to me, there was a couple of words in a row that kind of just really sums up what you just said. My beliefs are based upon direct spiritual contact with God.
Yes. I think you can have that kind of contact. I mean, you can go, I think, to a church, which is great, or a synagogue, or a mosque, and have connections with God. And I do belong now to a temple. But I think it's also possible to have that kind of direct contact by simply, going out there and taking a walk and talking to God, even if he doesn't answer you, just taking a walk and talking to God and asking for health, asking for strength, asking for courage, praying in a direct way. I mean, it can be in group settings, like in a religious setting, but it also can, I think, be something that you can do by yourself. And I think the whole idea is for all of us, all of we human beings on this earth, and I think when I think about the reason for the earth, I think it was set up by God. Being a scientist, it's like I look at it as a scientific experiment where we create an imperfect world now so that we all know imperfection, and we're all imperfect. And what we strive to do is to improve our character and be the best person that we can be. And when things come up in life, we try to do what's morally right. And then it's not a question then of religion anymore. It's a question of who you are as a person, and are you trying to be the best person that you can be. And I think once you do that and you keep kind of passing these moral tests that come your way, which God, I believe, sets for all of us, as you keep doing that, then as you progress, as all of us, it doesn't matter, like I say, what the religion is, Christian, Jew, non-believer, whatever. As you do that, I think what happens is that God may take a more direct role in your life, and some of those prayers now start to get answered. And maybe I should clarify. I think there's a saying that that really struck me when I read it. It was by some commentator on some passage in the Bible. He said, God offers his fragrance to all, but his wine is reserved for those who are righteous and wish to be guided by him. So, and I think you could add, who believe in him. So even though the person is a non-believer and he's not a believer in God but is a good person, that person will still receive the fragrance. But I think the person who is a believer in God receives the wine. And that stuck with me always. And when you know, there's an old saying, God helps those who help themselves.
Yes, he does. We have a couple things I want to touch on here. We're down to our last 8 minutes. I want to get to these. And of course, we want to get to the book. Very important. But one of the things that I really enjoyed was when I saw the book arrive in the mail, I saw there was a bookmarker inside the book. And one side of the bookmarker has covers of a couple of your books and a picture of you. Flip it over, it says King Solomon's Book of Proverbs, Proverbs 8, and it reads like this: I love those who love me, and those who search for me shall find me. For one who finds me has found life. God may be hidden from view, but these books demonstrate that he is here in our world and is watching. Divine experiences and divine plan jump out from the pages. What gave you the idea to put that in there? That's terrific.
Well, I think that most of us go through life believing life is, and there are great things about life. You're raised and you have a good childhood, hopefully, and you get married or you don't get married, you have a job. And I think what you think about in life is the physical world and what the physical world can offer you. So it can offer you riches or poverty or whatever, and material possessions, which it should. I mean, life is a gift. My wife always told me that. Marcia always told me that life is a gift. So it's meant to enjoy. But besides the physical world, there's a spiritual world. And the physical world, I believe, is a creation of the spiritual world. And the spiritual world, of course, is God. And I believe you can't experience the full essence of life if you just experience the material world. Now, there's nothing wrong with the material world if you're a good person.
Amen. Now,
get their whole life, to get life, and if you find God, you find life, because that encompasses it all. You have both the physical and the spiritual.
Jerry, of course, the reason we brought you on, one of many reasons, is we wanted to hear about your book, Gog and Magog, The Devil's Descendants. We have about 3 minutes or so, so give us a little bit of an overview of this thriller fantasy book, if you will.
Okay, this is actually the first novel, even though the second book was a novel as well. And in each of the books, I bring out biblical themes, and this book is no different. But in reading about Gog and Magog, these are biblical prophecies that are written about in both the Old and New Testament, and also in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. You have dreams in the book of Daniel, and I kind of connected the dots and connected the information in the book of Daniel with the prophecies of 3 Hebrew prophets, Ezekiel, Joel, and Zechariah. And I wrote a political thriller fantasy with angels and with miracles of God in order to kind of tell people about these prophecies. That was my ulterior motive. And I was trying to bring them out because most people, and I did that with my with the Messiah interviews as well, I was trying to bring out things that are written about but are really not on the public stage of life. And so I thought, how can I do this in an entertaining way? And I therefore wrote a whole fantasy which begins with Satan, the fallen angel, being kicked out of heaven, and the book as Satan finds himself outside the Garden of Eden. He enters the Garden of Eden, he entices Eve, and then he basically, Cain is descended from Satan in my fiction. He seduces Eve, and Abel is produced through Adam and Eve. And what happens is you go from biblical times all the way up into modern times. In the novel, there's a modern-day Abel and a modern-day Cain, and the modern-day Cain happens to be the son of the President of the United States, and the devil is still alive. Satan is still alive throughout this story, this fictional story. And so what you have is the final battle between good and evil. I write it as the final battle between good and evil. And there are some things that are written, there are some riddles in the Bible that nobody really bothers to kind of look at. But in the Garden of Eden, for instance, God tells Eve that your descendants will fight the devil's descendants. Well, how can the devil have descendants? Well, there's only one way that I know you can have descendants, but anyway, the book is fictional, but you do wind up with the president and his son as being the devil's descendants, with the devil there too. And you have a clash between the forces of good, a modern-day Abel, and other characters in the book. And I try to weave a story whereby you would have a lot of fun, and there would be a lot of surprises in the book, and you would go from page to page, and the book would keep you excited from page 1 to the end of the book.
Jerry, we're going to have to leave it there. We're just about out of time. We're talking about the book Gog and Magog, The Devil's Descendants. Jerry Pollock is the author. Jerry, this book and all of your books, how can you obtain copies of those books?
Well, you can go out to Amazon, and the paperback, you could get the ebook if you wanted a Kindle. The Gog and Magog will soon be out in all ebook formats. The other 2 books are in the Kindle, the Nook. These are all ebook readers. So you can get it as a paperback on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other sites. Sometimes you'll find them in an occasional bookstore as well. But it's easy enough to get either the paperback or the ebook, the digital ebook, from one of those sales.
If anyone enjoys your writings and would like to find out more about you, is there a website that pertains to you, or an email or anything like that?
They could contact me. That might be good. I have a website, but they can contact me directly. I'd be happy to correspond and talk to people.
What is your website and then your email quickly? We're almost out of time.
Okay, www, I'll give you the quick way in, www.third, THIRDTEMPLE, info.com, thirdtempleinfo.com. My email is JERRYPOLLOCK at BellSouth, BELLSOUTH.net.
Our guest on Second Chances has been Jerry Pollock. And Jerry, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.